Shove it, man!
Alright, it's the gut-punching, girl-taking, never-shaking, beat-breaking, one and only HAWK, all night, all day. Not on weekends when I lay. Holy crap, I've never made a video about the main event Mafia. How is that possible? The Mafia is one of those factions in wrestling which is extremely divisive. You take a bunch of former world heavyweight champions, shove them together in a super faction, and the narrative goes something like this.
Small Joe, you can fly back to the Isles of Samoa, and the only question they'll ask is, who's the fat, who's the half-breed?
They spent every week making fun of the young guys on the TNA roster. Everyone was buried and the Mafia were just here to have a laugh and get a final payday. But there is another side to this. It delivered TNA some of their highest viewership, gave us some of the most memorable promos of all time, and gave TNA some legitimacy. So who's right? It seems perfect for an episode of Was It Any Good? Before we start, let the Hawk know if the Mafia was any good in your eyes, and what other divisive subjects can I look back at with the question of was it any good? Also making its debut this week is a very exciting graphic. I used all the money you gave me for the Boy Brew to get this one made. Bring up the Perco Pumpoz book stingometer. If something good happens, one jab to the left. If something bad happens, one jab to the right. But we won't be doing crisscross because your girl's not out tonight. The group officially starts in October 2008. Kurt Angle proclaims he is going to change the face of professional wrestling forever with an announcement. And the announcement is that Angle, Booker, Sharmell, Kevin Nash and the Stinger are now all friends. They all feel disrespected by the young guys in TNA. Nash's reason for joining is because of how Samoa Joe dealt with Scott Hall's no-show at Turning Point 2007, almost a year before this.
Scott Hall, Chico, kiss my ass. You punked out and you're a punk.
That's pretty dumb. Kurt toasts the main event Mafia. The very same night, Book reveals his vanity title, the Legends title. This thing is beautiful, and despite what happens to that belt in the future, at the time, this thing fit Booker perfectly. It would help add to the image of the main event Mafia, and I'm very visual with my Hawkeye, so this is good. It's established straight away that AJ Styles and Samoa Joe will be the Mafia's main targets. Mick Foley would also be an enemy of the Mafia, as he was revealed as a new major investor in TNA. Now, whilst Foley wouldn't exactly fit into the main event Mafia because he's scruffy, making him an enemy of the Mafia is muddying the waters a bit. After all, he's a main event legend, but he's siding with the young TNA guys, and he's only been in the company 2 minutes. And here lies the first problem. They want to do a storyline of a war between the wrestling legends and the young TNA guys, but Foley is on the side of the young guys. Not a good start, it's blurring the lines too much. It becomes clear quite quickly that this storyline is going to include lots of shoot elements. Styles would regularly blame the main event Mafia guys for putting WCW out of business. They tried to rally the troops against the Mafia, but it was evident straight away that all they could rally was X Division guys, and ODB for some reason. And they couldn't even all get on. So it's AJ Styles, Samoa Joe and a bunch of X Division guys who all hate each other, trying to go against 4 former world champions. It already feels like a one-sided affair after 2 weeks. Kevin Nash is still talking about Scott Hall no showing a pay-per-view a year ago. He tells Samoa and Joe he didn't show up because Joe wasn't worth the rub. Booker goes on to say that they look like a bunch of bums who dress like geeks. He vows to take them all out by the end of the year. Geez, 2 weeks in and the narrative seems to be right, but let's give this a chance, it's early days still. Joe and Styles winning the first match against the Mafia gives me a bit of hope, and the TNA roster tried to show some unity. Let's talk about the TNA World Champion Sting, because I've not really mentioned him much so far. Sting is still a face, or at least he seems to be, despite being in the heel Mafia. He doesn't seem to be a bad guy, and he's just upset about being disrespected. He's going to be the most calm-headed, reasonable member of the group. It's an interesting dynamic to have the Mafia having Sting here because he's a more complicated character than the rest of them. Interesting and good so far from Steve Baldwin. In the meantime, AJ Styles is trying to recruit Christian Cage to his side of the war. I'd be okay with that because Christian is a guy who could realistically sit on either side of this war. The show feels crazy at this point. The Mafia are battering Abyss and Matt Boring when the TNA originals saved them. Then freaking Scott Steiner is here with a pipe. The Mafia go on to beat up all the guys of ease. Sting only joins in the attack because AJ spat at him. Scott Steiner has joined the Mafia and he's taken out almost 8 guys on his own. He's being called the Mafia Hitman. I'm still being patient, but it's so one-sided. I guess it's fine, the Mafia needs to be a threat in the early days to establish the struggle that TNA is going through. I'm sitting on the fence for now, but I will say the TNA guys desperately need to retaliate, so do we get that? No. One of the most infamous Mafia promos take place almost straight after this. The Mafia dressed to the nines proceeds to cut a promo, or should I say Steiner proceeds to cut a promo, telling the TNA guys they're all geeks and all they care about is video games and Dave Meltzer match ratings. They aren't stars and they aren't on the same level as any of the Mafia members. This promo falls into the so bad that it's good territory. The looks on the Mafia members' faces as Steiner lets loose on the mic is priceless, so this was good to me. But then it all goes wrong because Samoa Joe tries to retaliate on the mic, and all he can talk about is the amazing matches that have taken place in the X Division, which proves Steiner right. Then they try to recruit Christian Cage to join them, but he wants nothing to do with the war, thus confirming everything Steiner said. If they could have retaliated in a way that recovered their status, that's fine, but this was a straight up burial in the end. So here we are, slipping back into the bad territory again. It's going to be a one-sided war, isn't it? The first pay-per-view during this so-called war was Turning Point 2008. Booker T and Christian had a match where if Christian lost he'd have to join the main event Mafia. It was a stupid match with loads of interference with Sharmell, and Booker T wins it, so Christian now has to join the Mafia. Kurt Angle also beat Abyss in an insanely good match that had nothing to do with the main event Mafia war, so why am I even talking about it then? I don't know, someone smack me one. Abyss would not be included in the Originals faction despite being a TNA original and despite them needing some believable wrestlers. Kevin Nash beat Samoa Joe, bet that got a few people angry back in the day. And for the world title, Sting beat AJ Styles. It doesn't help that Mick Foley described the TNA Originals performance as embarrassing. He gave them all a verbal dressing down after. A complete joke. Okay, on the Mafia side of this thing, the Mafia seems to be giving Scott Steiner a resurgence in his career. Great stuff, there were so many times in TNA where Scotty didn't have enough to do, but now he does. The whole Christian Cage storyline turns out to be dumb and pointless because straight away Angle accuses Christian of joining the WWE. A complete waste of time having everyone trying to recruit him for a month, just dumb and bad. They throw him a going away beatdown party, but it's noticeable that the Stinger isn't part of this beatdown. Christian leaves. The next victim of the Mafia is the War Machine Rhino. They throw him in a coffin and get rid of him. This causes Rhino to join the other side of the war, for a little bit. Sharmell even has her own storyline because ODB doesn't respect her. I'm not sure why, Sharmell isn't a wrestler. In the ring, the Mafia are still winning every match they have. I'm giving this until the next pay-per-view to change because it's starting to get over the top now. It's at this point in the video that a wild Slapnuts appears.
Double J, Jeff Jarrett.
He's tried to remain neutral in this war, but as the TNA founder, he gets annoyed with Kurt Angle beating everyone up. He agrees to a match with Angle if Angle can beat Rhino. In the meantime, Rhino has now named the TNA Originals the TNA Frontline, and he seems to be the leader because they suck so badly. Immediately, Kurt Angle says the entire TNA Frontline takes it up the back door as everyone bursts out laughing. Let the burial continue. Bad, bad, bad. The next thing of note is the Mafia and the Frontline both competing to get the Dudley Boys to join their side of the war. It's a double cross though, and in a rare moment in this storyline, the Frontline actually get the last laugh as the Dudleys join the Frontline. They really needed to do something to make this war feel more even, and they did it, so it's all good. With the Dudley Boys on side, it feels more like the tables have turned, pardon the pun, and the Mafia are looking shook. And it seems even more like things are changing when Rhino beats Sting with the gore in the main event. At the pay-per-view, Angle is successful in beating Rhino though, because Al Snow randomly interferes. I don't think this was ever mentioned again. Angle will now get his match with Slapnuts that he wanted. And in the main event of that pay-per-view, the Mafia beat the Frontline in a big tag match. Once again the Mafia cheat, and once again Sting beats Samoa Joe. Couldn't damn Devon Dudley take the damn pin in this damn match? Was the main event Mafia just designed to ruin Joe's TNA career? Because he feels like their biggest victim so far. And spoiler, that isn't going to change. I think this is a good time to talk about the Mafia's portrayal. The music fits the vibe perfectly. They all look like stars and they've all got their part to play. The lineup's great. Adding anyone else to this group would devalue it at this point. The Genesis pay-per-view continues the trend of the Mafia winning all the important matches. Angle beats Slapnuts in a great match. Sting retains his title against Rhino. And in the main event, it's announced that Kevin Nash was injured and unable to make the show. So Booker T drafted in a replacement. It was Cute Kip, aka Billy Gunn. A laughable replacement considering he's been playing the part of a woman's manager for the last year. Not good at all, it would have been far more badass to have the Mafia not need an extra man. The Mafia of course lost this 6-man match, but there was nothing on the line, so who cares? It feels like every week there's a gang beating going on, and every week only one dumbass from TNA roster tries to stop them on their own. Here's an idea, run out as a group. It's a knock on the storyline, not the Mafia itself. Scott Steiner playing eeny meeny miny mo to see who's going to have a match tonight. That's great. Kurt Angle the Godfather does the majority of the talking for the group, but Sting shows he might not be fully on board because he gets annoyed with Angle speaking for him. It's good that they have a slow burn with this Sting-Angle feud. Booker T starts a storyline with a referee, Shane Saul, who's actually a wrestler, but they don't know it. Not this. Kurt Angle turns into a man possessed and declares that he's putting out hits on all the members of the TNA roster. AJ Styles is his first victim. Kurt's doing great heel work at this point. The main event Mafia completely take over TNA for an entire episode of Impact. Booker T is Black Snow and Kevin Nash is Chet Lemon. We've got Sharmell as the backstage interviewer, Scott Steiner is the ring announcer giving people introductions in the only way that Scott Steiner can, and Booker T does a running commentary as he beats people up in the ring. The whole episode is just hilarious, it's worth at least 3 points, it's that good. And yes, it is a bit of a burial, but it only happened once, so I'll let it slide. The first riff in the Mafia occurs when Kurt Angle is granted a title shot at Sting at the pay-per-view, also featuring the Dudley Boys. Angle's only getting a shot to cause a rift in the Mafia, but before we can get to that, we have a tag match. Angle refuses to tag in or match, while Sting seems to not want to take part in any of the beatdowns. Angle and Sting have to be separated by the rest of the Mafia, the first chink in the armour. Angle and Sting do spend most of the pay-per-view match fighting each other, but Sting retains by beating Devon Dudley. Angle looks livid, but this isn't over. Kurt Angle now demands a one-on-one title shot with the Stinger, Steve Borden. The TNA management seem like they're trying to turn Sting to their side, but he's not biting. Scott Steiner backstage promo insulting Samoa Joe, calling him an out-of-shape half-breed. Hilarious every time, good stuff. Angle asks Sting to lie down in their match and hand him the title, which flips Sting out and he gets personal talking about Angle's wife leaving him. The rest of the Mafia aren't taking sides. Whilst this is pretty compelling, couldn't someone from outside the Mafia take the war to the Mafia and Sting's belt? Shove it if you don't like it. AJ Styles is feuding with Booker T over the Legends title and he's trashed his locker room. Pretty entertaining good feud, it's nothing incredible but it's decent. Scott Steiner cuts a promo whilst bench pressing. He would only be afraid of Samoa Joe if he was dressed as a hamburger. Joe chokes Steiner with the barbell, hilarious stuff. All the fans are now sent home because Sting and Kurt Angle are going to have an empty arena match. It's built up to be a massive thing. It's a brawl which Sting wins and he tries to extend the hand to Kurt who spits in his face at the end of it. The hatred in this feud is off the charts, good. Samoa Joe with a hentai penis tattoo on his face, threatening to behead Scott Steiner with a plastic knife. Jesus, bad. Kevin Nash having to play the serious peacekeeper one in the group. No, I'm not buying it, sorry Nash. They couldn't exactly use Booker or Steiner for that role, but I still ain't buying it. Slapnuts uses all the feuding as a chance to cause serious damage to the group and he puts them in a title match against each other. Huge lengthy build to Sting and Angle. Booker T completely runs down the TNA roster saying it's full of nobodies and it wouldn't exist without the Mafia. Strong words coming from somebody whose good TNA matches you could count on 2 fingers. Samoa Joe once again holding a weird knife upside down against Steiner's face. So dumb. And now it's the main event Mafia security team, Sally Boy and Rocco. For some reason they're used as actual wrestlers and they suck. And they were used a lot. Bad times. Booker T loses the Legends title to AJ Styles, so at least someone's got one over on the Mafia. Sheamus for a second tier belt. Also, Sting and Angle finally have their title match, which Angle loses due to Slapnuts, the special referee. Sting moves on to feud with Mick Foley. It's interesting that even 5 months in, Angle is still referring to the TNA roster as worthless jabronis, and he's proved right, because the cameramen barely focus on them when they're talking, and you have no idea how much time of each show is dedicated to the main event Mafia segments. It had its charm at first, but there isn't a war anymore, and after 5 months it just feels like TNA giving a load of TV time to old guys. Sting finally dropping the belt, but it's to Mick Foley of all people. Scott Steiner constantly trying to recruit Jeff Jarrett to join the main event Mafia. Could you imagine the unbearable levels of television if that had happened? The TNA guys are still worthless. Only Jarrett and Foley get to do anything to the Mafia. Every single promo is just Jarrett and Foley going at the Mafia and vice versa. For some reason, Jenna Moroska is in TNA and she's apparently an investor, but she doesn't get on with Booker's wife Charmel. Why was this needed? Kevin Nash beating Naito and Takahashi with ease in a handicap match. No comment. At this point, it's like the TNA roster is just trying to carry on as normal whilst the Mafia, Foley and Jarrett are all fighting. Bad. Matt Morgan tries for a few weeks to impress the main event Mafia in an effort to join them. He proceeds to lose every match he has where he's supposed to be impressing them. Very impressive, Matt Boring. They do this fatal 4-way pay-per-view where each competitor has to make a sacrifice and put something on the line. Turns out that Sting beats Angle and he's won the position of Godfather in the main event Mafia. I'm going to call this good because something needed to change. Either that or just end it altogether, so Sting's in charge now. Sting immediately makes changes and he bans Charmel and Jenna from the Mafia. Great, good stuff. He also fires the 2 pointless security guards. Sting is trimming the fat. Something else good that happens is Samoa Joe is back and he has orders from his Nation of Violence to take out each member of the main event Mafia. He also has to kill Kurt Angle. His words, not mine. Well, at least someone under the age of 40 is getting a chance. The Mafia are taking these threats from Samoa Joe very seriously. They have a long sit-down interview in the ring about what these threats mean to them. Steiner is hilarious again. It also feels like Booker T is almost a parody of himself at this point. He's completely insane. Joe takes out all the Mafia on his own. Yay, someone's finally getting over on them. He just wants to take out Kurt Angle now. Good stuff. On to the Slammiversary pay-per-view, which is the big one for the Mafia. Matt Morgan loses to Sting with a place in the Mafia on the line. But more importantly, in the main event they have a King of the Mountain match for the TNA title. Joe has the match won. He's climbing to the top of the ladder. Do it, Joe, become the champion. But then he stops and he hands the belt to Kurt Angle. And Angle is the new TNA champion. What, after all that, Joe turned heel and joins the Mafia? Why, that doesn't even make sense after everything that happened. That's -3 smack points for this dumb twist in the storyline. Nobody wanted to see Samoa Joe and the Mafia. Apparently they used Jenna Morasca's money to buy Samoa Joe off. I thought he was meant to be like a savage, why would he care about money? The Mafia turned against the Stinger with Nash saying that the honour and respect thing isn't working for him anymore. They kicked Sting out the Mafia and Kurt as the leader again. Steiner and Booker have now set their sights on the tag titles, which is the first time in forever that the Mafia has been involved with anyone not named Jarrett, Foley or Styles. And it's completely one-sided, poor beer money. They lost and were beaten at every opportunity. Victory Road 2009 features Sharmell and Jenna Morasca settling their differences in one of the worst wrestling matches of all time. Why they decided to take up a slot on this pay-per-view is beyond me. Kevin Nash beating AJ Styles for the Legends title and AJ throwing a tantrum after the match. Jesus Christ. Steiner and Booker beat Beer Money for the tag titles. Samoa Joe beats Sting when Taz debuts as his Nation of Violence advisor. And finally Kurt Angle beats Foley for the world title. All the matches featured cheating or interference and it was a pretty bad pay-per-view. I wouldn't have a problem with this dominance, but we're like 9 months into the story and we only just got to the point of complete Mafia dominance. A bad show, and if you weren't sick of the Mafia, you certainly would be now. Admittedly, it was quite exciting at first to see Taz come in to partner Samoa Joe. Maybe this will be the start of a monster push. It wasn't. Bobby Lashley was now in TNA and he took out the entire Mafia on his own at once. Standard TNA just pushing the ex-WWE guy and no one else. Bad. Tracy Brooks joins the Mafia at some point, for no point. Foley captures the Legends title from Nash in a match which Lashley was in. Why couldn't Lashley win the belt instead of him? I know it sounds like I'm not making sense given what I said a second ago, but at least Lashley's young. Now it's clear that the Mafia is pretty OP, so what happened next was weird. The main event Mafia agreed a deal with Eric Young's World Elite faction. So now it's a group of about 15 people. Booker seems a bit unsure about the agreement. It's ridiculous, there was already no one to stand up to the Mafia, so what's gonna happen now? Eric Young does some of his best promo work of his career, so I'll give him props for that. Good. Pretty cool TNA moment. It's the TNA riot. The TNA wrestlers try to make a stand against the Elite Mafia and everyone fights all over the building. The police have to be called eventually and break it up. Kevin Nash is solely motivated by money. I mean, he always has been, but it's now his character. He refuses to do anything unless they pay him a bit more and it's referenced all the time. Samoa Joe is a champion again. The X Division champion. Well, that pretty much confirms there's no push coming. Kevin Nash is the Legends champion after beating Foley, and Kurt Angle is still the world champion. The Mafia now officially have all the gold in TNA. Matt Boring is still sulking that Kurt Angle hasn't made him an official member of the Mafia. I don't blame him, they seem to be letting anyone join at this point, why not him? AJ Styles goes for a loser storyline and considers quitting wrestling. He has to get pep talks every week from Sting because the Mafia has made him such a bitch. After only a few weeks of the alliance between the Mafia and the World Elite, things start falling apart. A rare positive at this point, Kevin Nash holds auditions with ladies to join the Big Sexy World Tour. There's not been anywhere near as many entertaining segments as I thought, but this is one of them. He tells us to stay wet, my friends. Good. We're getting towards the end of things here, but we've got a cool match and a moment at No Surrender. It's a 4-way for the title, and during the match Sting throws himself out of the ring to help AJ capture the world title from Angle. It's like he sacrificed himself for AJ's happiness. So all you little kids out there need to find a girl who'll do this for you. Find your Steve Borden. Someone from outside the old guys finally wins the big one. Shame it was a 4-way, but I'll get what I can take at this point. Good. It's funny to me that it's taken almost an entire year for the Mafia to finally have a disciplined rival faction going against them. And they're all heels. It turns into like the second TNA riot. Interesting to see where this one goes. Samoa Joe lost the X Division title to the Amazing Red in a really cool moment. The final main event Mafia pay-per-view was Bound for Glory 2009. Kevin Nash lost his Legends title to Eric Young in a triple threat. Also on the show, Booker T and Scott Steiner lost the tag titles to the British Invasion in an excellent, basically a TLC match. They called it Full Metal Mayhem in TNA. Kurt Angle also did something completely out of character on this show. After beating Matt Boring, he shook his hand. Poor Matt Boring, he suffered more than anyone because of the Mafia. And I'm not saying Boring's particularly good or bad, I'm just saying he suffered.
It's gonna be Mike Morgan.
Wait, Matt Morgan.
Who's Matt?
The guy that you're about to face.
Well, who's Mike? Mike, I'll beat them both up. Bad as I beat up Matt Morgan, he's not even going to remember what his name is.
Oh my God.
That was Matt Morgan. Ladies and gentlemen.
On the following Impact, Kurt Angle admits he was wrong in his treatment of the young guys. On the same night, it's announced that Booker T has left TNA. So the Mafia ends almost exactly a year to the day it started. Just 1 week after the Mafia ended, it was announced that Hogan had signed with TNA. Nash carried on the storyline with Eric Young, and Samoa Joe would soon be abducted by ninjas. Everyone kept talking about the Mafia ending, which angered Scott Steiner, who was adamant that the main event Mafia hadn't ended and still existed. This went on for a couple of months, and each promo was funnier and funnier. After feuding with Bobby Lashley, Steiner was released, and he missed the whole TNA WWE Monday Night Wars. Whew, damn, that's probably the most in-depth I've covered a storyline or wrestler on Was It Any Good. Probably because there was like 8 people in this group. It started off exciting and it was attention grabbing, but it soon became clear that the TNA Frontline weren't going to pose any sort of threat. I was fine with the Mafia burying them in the early days of it, if it meant there was some sort of payback coming, but there wasn't. The Mafia Frontline storyline was dropped and the Mafia was essentially left without a rival, so instead their biggest threats were Mick Foley, Slapnuts, and infighting. It's so bizarre that the TNA originals didn't go up against them properly. The main event scene was made really boring by this fact. Every main event match for a year featured either Slapnuts, Sting, Angle or Foley, with the rare appearance of AJ Styles. There were so many pointless members, it should have stayed as the original group. I'm getting NWO vibes when I say that. The main event Mafia soaked up so much TV time, but I can't blame TNA for that, they were getting huge ratings for them. Angle played the dickhead leader well, Sting played the reluctant heel co-leader well, Steiner and Nash had their moments where they were entertaining, and they actually pulled off the odd good match too. But Booker T, I found him pretty annoying with that fake accent, it was completely out of control, and all his matches had cheating from his wife. Samoa Joe was a terrible fit that should never have been in the group in the first place. Whoever came up with that idea needs a punch to the gut. Although AJ Styles won the belt in the end, it wasn't in some high stakes single match against Angle that you might have expected. The Mafia carried on for a bit after his title win too, so it's bizarre that the Mafia was technically ended by the World Elite faction. I would have liked it to end in some big elimination tag against the TNA originals, but instead the Mafia just kind of fizzled out. I can't comprehend why the Mafia didn't have any competition. What was the gain from the main event Mafia storyline? Eric Young, because it established that he could be a serious wrestler. That doesn't sound like a very good payoff to a year-long storyline. That's why we do this sort of thing though, because when I was watching this back in 2009, this was awesome to me. But you can clearly see all the problems now. It doesn't mean that I'm not entertained by this still now. It's still holds a place in my heart, but after watching this whole thing back, overall, it wasn't good. I'd be interested to know what you all thought and what do you think should have happened with the Mafia. And if you don't agree with that, you're having a laugh, ain't you?